So I've heard it from a number of investors. They say, show me that it's better business, not just show me that it's an equal way of doing business that has good social outcomes and good environmental outcomes, but show me that it's better business. And that's I think a normal mentality where we're asking someone to change. So that's just a barrier and a challenge that we have, and I think the only way to get through this is by showing the money, showing the business case, and showing that this makes sense. Of course, the focus on cost instead of benefit is human nature. What is it going to cost me? Not thinking about the benefit in the long term. This is just how we think. So until we really have a broader look at it from a sustainability perspective and the broader benefits, it's going to be a little bit hard to sort of shift and really get this momentum happening. But there are, let's take a bit of a global perspective now, lots of opportunities and lots of countries and people looking at green building as the next wave and the next revolution that's occurring. This is a picture of one of the many new cities that are going to be built in China. This is just a plan. The prediction is that China will build the amount of built environment space that we have today again over the next 20 to 50 years. So they're very keen to get it right. I've been talking with some of the China Development Bank and people involved in the highest level of government in China. And they have some development model challenges. So what they do is when they're going to develop a city like this, they carve it up and sell it to the highest bidder. They don't have any requirements for any energy efficiency or any integrated transport plans, any integrated storm water management, water, anything. They just sell it to the highest bidder. And what they're realising now is that development model for these new cities is not going to serve them. So what they're trying to do with a couple of venture capitalists from San Francisco and some of the leading thinkers in China is trying to say, let's take 3 of these new cities and do it differently. Let's master plan it. Let's get companies that have demonstrated ability to implement green. Let's look at how we can be a self-sufficient city, not needing energy, not needing external systems to support it, and wanting to figure out how they can get it right. They're also in the race for solar. They want to be the leading manufacturer of solar. So I think when we see that China is actually taking this seriously and looking at it as an opportunity, shows that the amount of market opportunity that's going to be there is huge. We're seeing projects like Mazda and the United Arab Emirates already building carbon neutral cities, seeing places in Korea building cities that they're saying 66% less in carbon emissions. Obviously they have a water problem, which you guys don't so much. So focus on water reduction is key for them. And then a little bit closer to home, we see Mexico. Some of their challenges are different. They have a challenge of 8.9 million people that don't have adequate housing. So green building is not just high-end, focus on high-end and new development now. It's shifted for many countries that's not their priority. The priority is dealing with some of the social issues that they have. That brings us to how carbon and the focus on emission reduction is going to actually help drive the green building market. So this is from a United Nations report, and it talks about how countries will not be able to meet their carbon reduction requirements unless they focus on the building industry. See the segments there, that building is 40% of energy use, 30% of global greenhouse gas emissions, and all of the studies that have been done show that we have the greatest potential at the least cost to reduce carbon emissions. I've heard here that you coin yourselves the AC nation, the air conditioning nation. Is that right? So it's this type of way of designing buildings and expectation of the space being cold and how those buildings are set up. That's causing us to use a lot of energy that might not necessarily be needed. So this is the space that we're in now. The question is, what are we going to do about it? Here are some of the studies that show that buildings are the greatest opportunity. I won't get into the detail of this, but it's basically, like Gustavo said, we are the sector that has the most opportunity. is, how do we unlock it? It's very complicated. How do we encourage a change in the way we do things, like I've just already been talking about, but singly focused on carbon? It might not necessarily be a driver in some countries, but it offers you a unique opportunity because you're classed as a certain type of country, and you're in the developing nations classification under the UNFCCC process, which means that there are unique financial mechanisms that you can use, which can stimulate your marketplace. So there's lots of jargon associated with carbon reduction. NAMAs and CDMs. NAMAs, Nationally Appropriate Mitigation Action, which means that at a government level, any action that's taken to reduce carbon can receive financial and technical support. The Clean Development Mechanism is a little bit more fixed, and it means that you can do project-based work where you set a reduction target and you have to meet that target over time, and then you can trade those emissions. So there's a combination of the Clean Development Mechanism and the NAMA, which some countries like Mexico, which I'm going to talk about now, are focusing on to stimulate the green building market because it provides a financial kick to get things started. This is I think it's the world's second building CDM project was in Los Alamos in Mexico, and that was a low-income housing project where they set a target, they had their baseline, they knew what an average energy consumption of this type of building was, and they said, we're going to put solar in, we're going to put better lighting in, and we're going to have better thermal mass and insulation, and we're going to reduce the carbon that this building has by this amount. That amount then can be traded and sold. So that provides the financial incentive, which goes back into the economics of making this project work. Actually this was the first one in South Africa, a CDM project where they did the same sort of thing, solar, hot water, energy efficient lighting, and thermal insulation in the ceiling, which they didn't have. And that money that they traded from the carbon credits is going back into maintenance and education in these villages. So these are in townships in South Africa. So it's doing a couple of things. It's dealing with the social issue of people having warmth, but also it's dealing with the national problem of 30% of the energy being stolen. So many of these townships take energy from the power lines without paying for it. So that's a massive national problem. So it deals with the power supply problem, it deals with the quality of life for these people, and for many of them in the townships, it gives them an education. So they actually train the people on site to install this. So it has an interesting kind of flow-on effect. There's another interesting project that's really actually happening as we speak at the moment now in Mexico. And I thought I'd just mention it. It seems like it's a bit of a project in transition, but it's called a NAMA, and it's a focus on the commercial built environment, so it's non-residential, and they are taking an interesting approach where they've realised that the commercial building standards exist but are very difficult to enforce. So they decided they didn't want to come out with a stick and make some sort of regulation right now. They felt that was not appropriate, and bringing up the regulation and enforcing regulation is a long-term problem. So they're looking at what are the low-hanging fruit. What can we do now to get the carbon reduction that they want and to get the financial incentives from the international community that are available through the NAMA schemes. So what they've done is that they've identified cost-effective emission reduction strategies through 5 pilot projects. And from that, they're looking at what are these best practice examples, and they want to showcase them. And the other thing that they've done to get these best practice examples is they've had what do you call it, a contest, like an architectural contest, but also for the engineering community, and they're awarding financial incentives for the increase in cost to 100 of the best projects. So they're basically saying to industry, what are your solutions? Come with your best solution. We will fund the financial increase from what it would have cost. They obviously had the baseline, so they know what that increase in cost is. And then this is a NAMA through what they're doing is sort of raising awareness and capacity building within the country. So that's happening now, it's very new and it's very interesting. And I know that the Green Building Council is following it very closely and is going to be keen to make sure that we transfer some of that experience. So, what are we going to do about all this? It's all good and well, it's transformation happening, there's a massive opportunity, but it comes down to what happens on the ground. So how are we going to gear up? What are we going to do as industry players? We've seen the momentum in the green building marketplace. You see that the growth of green building councils around the world. I mentioned there are 89 countries. These are in all sorts of countries now. More than half of our members are in developing countries and are very focused on this. How do we make the opportunities with CDNs and NAMAs? But then many of the other countries in Europe, and especially in Europe, they're not focused on NAMAs at all. They have a pretty existing built environment. They're focused on the upgrade of their existing stock. So they have a whole other set of challenges that I'm not even going to go into today. But you see here, the Americas, there are 22. There were 5, now there are 22 countries in the Americas region that have green building councils. And because we have so many countries now that have green building councils around the world, we have 5 what we call regional networks. And these regional networks are designed to focus on what can we do in the region to make this market transformation process speed up. What do you need as a country? How can you share with your neighbours? What can you learn from Mexico? What can you learn from Brazil? What information can we share? So the America's regional networks really only started this year. We've actually started late last year. We've had 3 face-to-face meetings, and there's a very strong desire for the America's network and all of the green building councils involved to have a very clear regional voice and be very clear about what the region wants, with the idea of promoting themselves a little bit more internationally and also gaining credibility and attracting investment to the region. We had a meeting in Mexico not that long ago, a couple of weeks ago, and it was very clear that the group of people that are driving this are extremely motivated to develop a strategic plan together. And they want to focus on more than built. Want to focus on the urban built environment and keep it broad, a broad social agenda as well. I think the green building movement in general has been criticised for being quite narrowly focused on the environmental benefits and the environmental focus of green building, without really talking about the flow-on benefits for society, or even thinking about how we can help with low-income housing and the other things that are happening in Mexico. So we've moved beyond the focus on high-end office buildings. The focus of the regional network is definitely to build leadership capabilities within the green building councillors. You see the fantastic leaders that we have here in Panama. There are amazing, dynamic people in every country, and one of my roles is to help these people do their job better. And that is working with you guys and getting you engaged and making sure that as a green building council they're meeting your needs. The other part at the bottom, working with governments, I think is the other crucial aspect of what the green building councils want to do. There was the meeting that we had in Mexico was where the government, many of the governments, not all the governments from the region, came together in Mexico and shared their best practice policy lessons. So we're going to do that again next year. And I also was very interested yesterday to go to the City of Knowledge and hear about the opportunity that exists with such an amazing project going on here. So as a regional network, and with the things that are happening, with a focus on working with governments, a focus on building business capability, and what might be possible working with fantastic projects like the City of Knowledge, I know the Panama GBC is very keen to take a leadership role, especially in the near region around you, so I'm sure we'll be back. Let's just have a think about the different roles. it's all good and well to say to government, you know, we should do this. But government